Hello, today I want to talk about something other than My Hero Academia. Or well, I'm still going to use My Hero Academia as an example at some point, but it's not going to be your usual My Hero Academia discussion, it's not going to be a My Hero Academia review, of course, because it's a Thursday when I'm recording this. Instead, I want to talk about just a general topic when it comes to anime and manga. The timing of this topic is quite random. I'm not making this video now because something has occurred very recently that made me suddenly want to talk about this different topic. The topic that I want to talk about could end up being just a ramble or a very loose discussion because I don't really have a script or any strict bullet points to follow, so let's just get started, shall we? I want to talk about my expectations when it comes to anime episodes and sometimes whole seasons or whole shows. This is something that is especially strong when I read the manga from which said anime is adapted. What do I mean exactly? Well, I prefer to think of watching anime based on a manga I've already read as a curse, because I have a big problem, if you could call it that, which is that I expect an adaptation to be perfect. I don't normally criticize on video regardless, but deep within, I sometimes have very wild things that I do want to say, I just don't ever end up doing it. This is usually not to do with the entire shows unless a show is of course built up to be something incredible but ends up derailing worse than my rants. If you're a subscriber of mine, you may or may not know what I mean by that. The most common example when I can be extremely picky, at least to myself, because as I said, I typically don't go ham on video, but it's when we get an anime episode that does something from the manga. Usually it does adapt the moment in question, but it does a really bad job of it, in my opinion. It doesn't necessarily mean that this has to be an objectively bad adapted episode, but it certainly affects the way that I experience this episode from whatever series it may be. I remember one time when this happened during the rescue of Bakugo in My Hero Academia, or slightly before the actual rescue. Bakugo had a great moment from the manga where the angle of which he was presented in the panel and the shading, his dialogue, everything was just perfect. In the anime, however, they do adapt this moment, it's still there, they haven't removed it, but it is so underwhelming in my opinion. It just didn't have that same flair to it. It didn't have any sort of impact on me. Like when I was watching this episode, it even took me quite a few moments to realize that is the same moment because it was angled differently. It didn't have any big, intense impact or whatever you want to call it. But enough of that. I did mention entire shows just a minute ago, and the reason I mentioned that is because I remember watching Darling in the Franxx, that mecha anime that received so much hype and popularity to the point where if a plot point went wrong, the man behind those decisions were being threatened. This anime, while it absolutely does not deserve threats, no series does. It had such a strong feel to it at first, but it changed a fair amount of episodes in. At first it had this really meme-like nature where anything could be a sexual innuendo, and then it got a little more serious, which wasn't actually bad, but it would occasionally drop a really mediocre episode in comparison to what you may have expected to come from something like that, given that it had such a strong opening. And these episodes happened quite frequently during Darling in the Franxx, at least. Like we had that one episode where the boys and girls had a weird fight and they ended up splitting up based on gender, which felt like it had very little to offer or anything at all to the story. Like I can sort of see what they were gunning for, but it just didn't deliver at all. And then now let's not talk about the ending of the actual anime of Darling in the Franxx. I won't go into much details, but basically it derailed so hard from what you really expected to happen that it became either laughably shit or aggravating, because you had really hoped that you would be getting something a lot less, stupid. But Darling in the Franxx is not exactly alone in this. There are countless shows where not just a single episode, but the actual point where things derail and the plot just transforms and takes a route that just isn't good at all. So sometimes I get mad because of writing, sometimes I get mad because of something so little as a change in the anime from what the source material was like, most people would probably not be as picky as me when it comes to the My Hero Academia example that I gave, but to me, being a huge fan of the manga, it just made me mad because it was my favorite moment in the manga, more or less, and it hits the screen right, it hits the anime, and there's the most underwhelming feeling I've felt from this series for a long time, from my personal opinion and my personal way of looking at the changes that sometimes happen. But there are opposites to this, where the anime actually performs surprisingly well even compared to the manga, so I gotta give some praise for that too. Like, the manga doesn't always come on top, but usually it does. And you know, I've said a few times on my channel, like, My Hero Academia is my favorite manga, but the thing is, it's not my favorite anime, and that's why, because sometimes things happen and it just makes me not like it as much. This is why I'm not really a huge fan of anime as opposed to manga in general, because, you know, when you adapt a manga into an anime, it has to fit a new format, and they do have to change up a lot of things. I get that, like, I understand they can't just keep everything the way it is. I absolutely understand that, so I'm not really blaming the staff or anything. I'm just saying, you know, I'm really displeased that sometimes they have to ruin the best of moments, as opposed to just maybe either removing or changing up just a minor moment that doesn't really have any level of impact on the story. So hopefully you get what I mean, at least with the whole thing where I feel like reading the manga when watching the anime can be a curse. I may have gone slightly off topic with the whole Darling in the Franxx scenario though. One thing though that I kind of want to say is that despite how I feel about this, reading the manga, despite being a very curse-like feeling whenever you end up watching an anime, I would never not read the manga, I don't think, because, well, weird as it may be to some people, I want to progress into the story quicker and then I have to read the manga unless it's a finished product, in which case I'll usually read the manga simply because it is the most accurate way of experiencing that story, because that's how the creator wanted it to be like. I mean, this wasn't always the case. I mean, usually, you know, back in the day, I hadn't really started reading manga, so anime was really the only thing I knew, which means that, you know, at the time, obviously I had a very different opinion, and even in my early days of reading manga, I wouldn't really say that this was the case. And even now, this isn't really the case every single time. Like, there's a lot of times when the anime can be really fucking good, and there's times when, you know, the anime isn't as good or just equal, you know, there's no change, which is fine as well. That means that you're not really gonna be dissatisfied when going into the anime, at least, which is a very good thing in my opinion, because that means you're at least not going to be disappointed, even if you aren't going to be surprised in a positive way. Sometimes I wish I could just temporarily, you know, just blank my mind, you know, just reset my memory of how an arc or a couple of chapters were in the manga and just experience it fresh in the anime, to really experience a series differently, or actually the same way as I did experience it during My Hero Academia's first season and the very first couple of episodes of season 2, because at the time I hadn't started reading the manga, so I got to experience the anime as the anime was. You know, I hadn't read the manga, so I couldn't really compare it, and I think that's really the crucial point that I'm trying to make here. Like, comparing the anime to the manga is what I suffer from badly, and now maybe it's just me, maybe a lot of people actually do this too. I would love to know, honestly, but that's not really the whole point of this video. I'm not really trying to convince people that the manga is better. I'm just really rambling on about what I think about, you know, anime after reading said manga. I still think most of the time that the manga is better. Sometimes the anime can be better, especially moments. Fights can be a lot of the times better than the manga, because depending on the mangaka, you know, they may not be as good as presenting a fight as some others. I'm really concerned as well for next year, because next year we're getting The Promised Neverland, we're getting Kimetsu no Yaiba, and a lot of other stuff like One Punch Man. I'm really worried that this is gonna be the case for that as well, because I do read the manga of The Promised Neverland. I've read a lot of the manga of Kimetsu no Yaiba, not quite caught up though. And as far as One Punch Man goes, I am fully caught up with that manga as well. So I may suffer from the same issue here, where, you know, I'll be using the manga as an example when watching these anime, and then maybe I'll get a very disappointing feeling when a certain point happens in the anime if it is badly done, in my opinion. opinion may not be bad in general, but just to me it may be underwhelming or whatever. So I really hope I don't have to experience that a lot, if at all, because it is something that I really find to be something bad, honestly. But at the same time, you know, the anime is the anime and the manga is the manga. They're technically two different things, even if the anime, at least in these cases, will be based on the mangas, you know. Anyway, that's really all I had to say in this video. I just wanted to really make a different video. I've been thinking about this since last weekend, you know. I just wanted to get the time to actually record it, and I finally have time to do so. And here it is, you know, my ramble about this topic. I don't really know if it's gonna be a good topic. Maybe it will end up badly. I don't really know, but I'm gonna upload it regardless because I need to upload, and YouTube is cruel. You gotta upload and I have to do it. I'm sorry. So yeah, anyway, I'd love to know what you guys think down below in the comments. Like, do you have a similar experience? Do you think I'm fucking stupid for this? Because honestly, I wouldn't even blame you if you thought that, because this is like an opinion thing. We're on the internet, you know. I know people are going to attack me for my opinion, and so I don't mind if you do. I'm not necessarily not going to retaliate, but I will definitely accept whatever comment you put out there, because trust me, you're not gonna offend me. It's not gonna happen. With that said though, be sure to Detroit smash that like button if you enjoyed the video, and subscribe if you haven't actually already done so. This is Chaotic Plus, and remember everybody, Toga is waifu, Toga is the laifu.